She was just a quiet maid, cleaning floors in a billionaire's mansion. He was cold, powerful, and untouchable. But one rainy night in the kitchen, their worlds collided, changing everything. What began as silence turned into stolen glances, forbidden love, and a connection strong enough to defy the world. This is the story of a girl with nothing, and a man who had everything, but was empty inside, until she touched his heart. Get ready for a romantic thriller full of emotion, heartbreak, redemption, and a love that broke all the rules, and melted even the coldest heart. Damien Lancaster was a man the world worshipped from afar, but no one truly knew. At 32, he was the icy king of Lancaster Tech, a billion-dollar tech empire stretching from Manhattan to Tokyo. His face was on Forbes, his name echoed in Wall Street boardrooms, but behind the headlines, he was a ghost in his own life. He lived in a fortress of steel and glass, a mansion perched above the Hudson River, overlooking the city that never slept. Yet he never opened his curtains, never attended his own parties, never invited anyone close. Staff whispered about him like he was a legend or a warning. Mr. Ice, they called him. Not because he was cruel, but because he was frozen, detached, emotionless. He didn't shout, he didn't smile, he simply existed, alone. Until she walked in. Ella Monroe arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, soaked to the bone but still clutching a paper resume. Her clothes were simple, her shoes worn, but her eyes held something pure, something kind. She had grown up far from New York, in a tiny southern town where neighbors still waved from porches and life moved slow. Her father died when she was 10. Her mother, now battling illness, was the only family she had left. Ella didn't come to New York to chase dreams. She came to survive. She needed money for medicine, for rent, for food, and so when the housekeeping agency offered her a full-time maid job at the Lancaster estate, she said yes. She didn't ask questions. She just showed up. The mansion was like nothing she had ever seen. Floors that gleamed like mirrors. Chandeliers worth more than her entire town. Cameras in every corner. Silence so deep, it echoed. And then there was him. She saw Damien for the first time on her second day. He entered the main hall without a sound, wearing a tailored black suit that matched the cold look in his eyes. He passed her like she didn't exist. Her heart skipped, but not from attraction, from fear. There was something haunted about him, something hidden. He never said good morning, never asked for anything himself. His assistant spoke for him, his phone never left his hand, and his eyes never lingered on anything human. Ella tried her best to stay invisible. She scrubbed floors quietly, folded sheets with care, cleaned rooms that looked like they'd never been used. She worked before dawn and left after dark. She was a ghost in a house full of silence. But even ghosts get noticed. One day, she found a dog-eared novel under a cushion in the sitting room. It was old, Wuthering Heights. She smiled and tucked it carefully on the bookshelf, not realizing he'd watched her from behind a door. The next morning, a new bookmark was left inside it, and the next week he passed her in the hallway and paused for half a second. "Good morning," he said, just once. That was the first time Ella Monroe saw a crack in Damien Lancaster's ice. She wasn't like the women he dated, if he even dated at all. She wasn't glamorous, she didn't wear makeup. She smelled like lavender soap and clean laundry, but she had light in her, light he hadn't seen in years. And Ella, though terrified of his silence, found herself wondering about the man behind the money. The eyes that looked tired behind the power. The way he stared out at the river, like he was waiting for someone who never came. She tried not to care, she tried not to feel. But late at night, while folding towels in the laundry room, she would think about him and feel the ache of loneliness they both shared. Two people from different worlds, one frozen, one gentle, neither expecting to feel anything. But sometimes the coldest hearts crack when they're touched by the quietest warmth. The storm rolled in without warning. Thunder low, like the sky itself was whispering secrets. Dark clouds painted the windows in shades of gray, and raindrops tapped against the glass like impatient fingers. By evening, most of the staff had already gone home. Roads were flooding, and the mansion fell into an eerie silence. Ella stayed behind. She hadn't planned to. But she didn't want to walk through a storm for the small studio apartment she shared with two other girls. Her back ached from hours of work, and her feet were sore, but the kitchen, empty and warm, felt like the safest place in the world. She took off her shoes, tucked her hair into a loose braid, and turned on an old jazz playlist she found on the mansion's speaker system. Billie Holiday's voice filled the air. As the soup simmered gently on the stove, Ella swayed to the music, completely unaware that she was no longer alone. From the hallway, Damien Lancaster watched. His footsteps had been silent. He had come downstairs searching for a glass of wine to calm the storm inside his chest. A storm that had nothing to do with the weather. He was restless, haunted by something he couldn't name. But what he saw in that moment stopped him cold, not with fear, but with something else, something warm. Ella. Barefoot, dancing, smiling. She looked like she didn't belong in his sharp, sterile world, and that made her even more captivating. She didn't know anyone was watching. She wasn't trying to impress. She was just being real. For the first time in what felt like forever, Damien Lancaster smiled. Not a small twitch of the lips, not the fake smirks he gave to photographers. A real, slow, warm smile that softened the cold edges of his face. He stepped forward. The wooden floor creaked softly under his weight. Ella turned around, startled, nearly dropping the spoon in her hand. Her eyes widened. I'm sorry, Mr. Lancaster. I didn't mean to. I thought... He raised a hand gently, stopping her mid-sentence. Stay. Just that one word. Simple. Calm. But it carried a weight that wrapped around her heart. She hesitated for a second, then nodded. Damien walked past her and poured himself a glass of wine. The air felt fragile, like one wrong move could shatter it. But neither of them wanted to move. Ella stirred the soup again, trying to calm her nerves. Her heart beat too fast. Why was he here? Why was he watching her like that? After a few minutes, he broke the silence. Smells good. You cooked? Yes, she said softly. Just a small meal, tomato soup. My mother used to make it on nights like this. He sat at the kitchen island, something he never did. Tell me about her. Ella blinked. My mother? Yes. No one ever asked her that. Not in this house, not in this city, not in this life. So she spoke. She told him about her childhood, about southern summers and backyard gardens, about watching her mother work 3 jobs and still come home humming old country songs, about the day her mother got sick and the night Ella promised she'd do whatever it took to help. Damien listened. No interruptions. No phone. No watch checking. Just eyes fixed on her as if she were the first real thing he had seen in years. Then she asked carefully, Do you miss your parents? His jaw tightened. He set down the glass. I lost them in a car accident when I was 19, he said, voice low. 1 minute I was at college. The next I was burying everything I knew. Ella felt her chest ache. I'm so sorry. He nodded. I built everything after that. The company, the house, the walls. She tilted her head. You mean the ones inside? That question made him go quiet. But he didn't look angry. He looked exposed. And for Damien Lancaster, that was terrifying. I don't talk to people like this, he confessed. Ever. Ella's smile was gentle. Neither do I. The storm outside grew louder, but inside the kitchen, the world felt still, like time had stopped for them. They didn't touch. They didn't kiss. But something far deeper passed between them. By the time midnight came, the soup had gone cold, but neither of them moved to heat it. Because that night in the quiet hum of music and rain, a crack appeared in the ice. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet breaking of something long frozen. And both of them knew nothing would ever be the same. From that stormy night on, nothing was the same. The mansion still echoed with silence, but it was no longer the cold, dead kind. It had changed. There was a warmth now. A subtle hum that pulsed through the walls. And Damien Lancaster, once called Mr. Ice, was the reason. He began to linger in the halls instead of disappearing behind locked doors. He no longer rushed out before the sun rose or spent his nights buried in business calls. Something inside him had shifted, and Ella had been the spark. He started asking for her by name. "Where's Ella? Have her bring the coffee, please. Ella's touch makes the sheets feel softer. I prefer her to handle my room." The staff raised eyebrows. Some shared curious glances. Others smirked, but no one dared say it aloud, not yet. Ella, for her part, felt like she was living in a dream she wasn't meant to enter. Mornings became precious rituals. She'd brew his coffee exactly how he liked it. Black, 1 cinnamon stick, no sugar. She'd find him in the glass solarium, standing quietly in a tailored suit, watching the fog roll off the river. And every morning he'd say her name, just her name. But the way he said it made her chest ache. Ella. It was soft, heavy, like her name had weight only he understood. They walked together through the garden when no one was around. He showed her the apple tree he planted when he first bought the mansion, back when he still believed in growing things. She laughed when he made a dry joke about board meetings and sharks in suits. He laughed too, surprised at himself. It had been years since he'd laughed like that. They sat near the fireplace on rainy evenings, saying nothing for hours, just breathing in each other's presence. She'd talk about books she loved. He'd talk about dreams he lost. There were moments so soft, they felt stolen. A fingertip brushing against a knuckle while passing a book. A breath caught when their eyes met and lingered too long. A heartbeat skipped when her laughter echoed through the halls like it belonged there. But outside their fragile little world, the real one started to whisper. The head maid began assigning Ella to different floors. The butler started checking her work twice, and one of the younger maids pulled her aside one afternoon and said, "Be careful, Ella. Billionaires don't fall for maids. They use them." Ella didn't respond, but it hurt. Then came the tabloids. One grainy photo, Damien and Ella walking too close in the garden. It landed online like wildfire. Billionaire's maid gets too close for comfort? Who is the mysterious girl in Damien Lancaster's life? Damien's legal team scrambled. His board grew nervous. And Ella? She panicked. "I should leave," she told him quietly one night, her fingers trembling as she folded the laundry outside his study. "I'm a problem you don't need." Damien looked at her like she'd just slapped him. "You are not a problem, Ella." "But the press, I don't care what they say." His voice was sharp, and then it softened again. "Don't let them decide who you are." She blinked back tears. "Then what am I to you?" He opened his mouth, closed it. Silence. That night they sat under the stars. The mansion rooftop offered a view of the city lights flickering across the river. Ella wore one of the thick wool cardigans he'd left for her in the laundry, and he sat beside her closer than usual. The air between them was thick with unspoken things. He turned to her, eyes shadowed with something raw. "I want to kiss you." Her breath caught. He leaned in, slowly, carefully. She could feel his warmth, smell the faint spice of his cologne. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the stars might hear it. But then, he stopped. Inches away from her lips, he pulled back. His eyes dropped to the ground. "You deserve more than someone like me." Those words shattered something soft inside her. She wanted to say he was wrong, that he was more than enough, that the way he listened, the way he saw her, truly saw her, was already more than any man ever had. But she said nothing, because she understood. They were walking a razor-thin line, a connection so fragile, so forbidden, that one step too far could destroy them both. Still, they didn't move. They sat in silence under the stars, with lips that never touched and hearts that already had. The air in Damien's mansion had grown warm in the weeks after that night under the stars. Warm with shared glances, with little touches, with the kind of unspoken love that lives in the quiet between words. But peace never lasts long when the world is watching. One bright morning, the house was still waking. Sunlight poured in through the glass walls. Ella was humming softly to herself, folding linens in the upstairs hall. She felt calm, almost happy. Like maybe, just maybe, she belonged there. Then the call came. Miss Monroe, Mr. Lancaster would like to see you in his study, now. The butler's voice was stiffer than usual, no explanation, just the command. Ella walked down the marble staircase, her fingers tightening around the hem of her uniform. The door to his study was half closed. She knocked gently. "Come in." His voice was cold, flat. Not the Damien she had grown close to. This was Mr. Ice again. When she stepped inside, she saw it instantly. His eyes. They weren't soft today. They were stormy. The kind of storm that didn't pass quickly. On his desk were open tabloids. One headline screamed in bold black letters, "Mansion Maid or Millionaire Hunter, Damien Lancaster's mysterious flame exposed." Photos were splashed across the glossy pages, images taken through zoom lenses. Ella walking barefoot through the garden, smiling in the kitchen, reaching for Damien's hand by the fountain. They made her look calculated, like she'd planned it all. Her breath caught. Where did these come from? He stood behind the desk, hands clenched at his sides. "You tell me," he said quietly, dangerously. Her stomach dropped. "What? Did you sell this?" His voice was razor sharp. "Did you invite the cameras? Were you waiting for your moment to become famous?" Ella froze. "No, Damien, I don't even know how—" "You told me your mother was sick, that you needed money." "I do," she said, tears already forming. "But not like this. I would never betray you." He flinched. "You think I haven't seen it before? The innocent ones always play it best." Her chest shattered. "Do you really think I'm that kind of person?" "I think I don't know who you are anymore." That line was the blade. It cut deeper than shouting ever could. She blinked, hoping he would see her pain and change his mind. But he didn't. His expression stayed like stone. "I think it's best if you leave," he said finally. Just like that. No proof, no questions, no trust. The man who had shared his soul with her had now shut the door in her face. Ella's hands trembled as she packed. She didn't own much. Just a suitcase and a framed photo of her mother, a few books, her favorite sweater. The halls that had once felt enchanted now echoed like a punishment. She walked through them for the last time, holding in her sobs until her throat burned. No one stopped her. No one said goodbye. And as she reached the front door, she paused. Turned back, just once. Damien stood upstairs watching from behind the glass of his study. She waited for something, a signal, a sign, anything. But he didn't move. He didn't come after her. He didn't believe her. So she walked out into the rain, her suitcase dragging behind her, mascara running down her cheeks. The same rain that had brought them together that first night now swallowed her whole. The mansion door shut behind her with a thud that sounded like the end of a fairy tale. 7 days passed, each one heavier than the last. The mansion that once held soft glances, warm conversations, and late-night laughter had turned back into what it used to be, cold, hollow, lifeless. The staff barely spoke. The kitchen was quiet. The garden had lost its bloom, and Damien Lancaster was drowning in the silence. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours in a week. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw hers, filled with tears, disbelief, betrayal. Not because she'd done something wrong, but because he had. He saw the way her shoulders shook as she walked out, the way she turned back one last time, hoping, begging he'd stop her. But he didn't. And now he couldn't even breathe without feeling the weight of that choice. He poured himself a drink to calm the ache in his chest, then another, but nothing helped. Until one morning, in the stillness of dawn, Damien found something under a velvet couch cushion. Something small and delicate, tucked away like a secret. Ella's bracelet, the one she always wore, silver, simple, inscribed with the word hope on the inside. He held it in his hands like it was the last piece of her, and something inside him shattered. He sank to his knees on the floor. She had left it behind. Not on purpose, but because she'd left in tears, in pain, because of him. That same day, his assistant barged into his study. "Sir, you need to see this," he said, urgency in his voice. He laid a folder on Damien's desk. Inside were documents, emails, a message chain between one of Damien's ex-girlfriends and a slimy tabloid writer. The truth spilled out in ink and shame. The article was fake. The photos were leaked intentionally. The entire story was crafted out of revenge. The woman had wanted to ruin Damien's new relationship before it even began. And Damien had believed her. His hands shook as he gripped the bracelet tighter. He had judged Ella, thrown her away, accused her of everything he feared most, when all she had ever done was love him purely, without asking for anything in return. He couldn't stay in that house another second. By nightfall, he was behind the wheel of his black Aston Martin, racing through dark roads and winding hills, the rain crashing down as if the skies themselves were punishing him for his blindness. He didn't stop for gas. He didn't care that he had no plan. He only had one mission: find her. Hours later, he rolled into a small town lit only by street lamps and the flickering neon sign of a corner diner. And there she was, through the fogged glass window, wearing a pale pink apron and wiping down tables with slow, tired movements. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes had lost their sparkle. Her smile was gone. Damien stepped out of the car, soaked the moment his shoes hit the pavement. The rain poured, but he didn't care. He pushed open the diner door, and the bell above it rang softly, too soft for a moment this big. Ella turned. She froze, a rag still in her hand. Her eyes locked on his wet hair, his drenched suit, the way his chest rose and fell like he'd run across the entire earth to get to her. Damien stepped closer, voice raw, heart in his hands. "I was wrong." Ella didn't speak. "I believed lies," he said, every word slow and trembling. "I let fear win. But you're the only real thing in my life, the only part that felt true." She blinked, her lips parted, but still, she said nothing. Damien reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the bracelet, held it out like an apology, like a confession. "You dropped this, the day I pushed you away." Her hand trembled as she reached for it. "I don't care what they write, what they say, what the world thinks I should be with. I only care that I let you go, when all you ever did was love me." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I love you, Ella," he whispered. "Not because you worked for me, not because you were kind to me, but because you saw me when no one else did, and I was too blind to see what I had until you were gone." She stared at him, heart thudding in her chest. And then, slowly, like dawn after the darkest night, she walked toward him. No more words, no more silence. Just a single, soul-deep embrace in the middle of a rainy diner. And in his arms, her sobs melted into his heartbeat. Two broken people, one healed moment. Forgiveness had never felt so warm. 3 months had passed since the rain-drenched reunion at the diner. But for Damien Lancaster and Ella Monroe, it might as well have been a lifetime. She returned to the mansion, not through the back door with cleaning supplies in hand, but through the grand front entrance, beside him. Not a maid, not a secret. His partner, his equal. The staff blinked in disbelief. The same girl who once polished the floors now walked beside the billionaire with her head held high, and love written in every glance he gave her. Some whispered behind closed doors. Others smiled quietly, as if they'd known all along. But the world outside the estate? It roared. Headlines exploded again, but this time with different venom. From mop to mansion. How Ella Monroe snagged the billionaire. Fairy tale or fraud? A maid's rise, publicity stunt, or true love? Ella read the articles, but she didn't flinch. Because every night, Damien held her hand and whispered truths stronger than any headline. "You are not their story," he said. "You're mine." And on a clear spring evening, in the same garden where he almost kissed her once but didn't, Damien dropped to one knee beneath a sky full of stars. The lanterns swayed in the soft breeze. The apple tree they used to sit beneath stood witness. And his voice, calm, raw, and full of reverence, spoke the only question that ever mattered. "Marry me." Ella didn't even wait for her tears to fall before whispering, "Yes." They didn't just build a love story. They built a purpose. Together, they started the Hope Foundation, named after the inscription on her silver bracelet. It offered housing, education, and job training for women in poverty. Damien poured millions into it, but Ella poured her soul. She stood on stages and told her story. Not the polished version, but the truth. A girl who cleaned floors, a mother who fought illness, a man who learned to love, and the bridge they built between two different worlds. They hired people who never got second chances, immigrants, formerly incarcerated women, mothers with no child care, people of every background and skin color, people who were invisible to the world but seen by Ella and Damien. Of course, the criticism didn't stop. There were snide comments at formal dinners, raised eyebrows at elite galas, invitations lost in the mail. One investor pulled out of a major deal saying, "A man of your caliber shouldn't mix love and business with someone like her." Damien looked him straight in the eye and replied, "Then you're not the kind of man I do business with." They lost partners, but gained something far better: integrity, purpose, real allies, and an unshakable bond. Their story wasn't perfect. There were days when old wounds resurfaced, when Ella felt out of place in designer rooms, when Damien still battled the fear of losing someone again. But each time they reached for each other, not away. And that was their power. They chose each other over and over again, even when it was hard, even when the world screamed that they shouldn't. Because love, when it's real, doesn't follow rules. It rewrites them. One night, years later, a reporter asked Ella during an interview, "How does it feel to have gone from a maid to marrying a billionaire?" Ella smiled, looked at Damien across the room, and answered simply, "I didn't marry a billionaire. I married a man who learned how to love." Final lesson. They said she was too small. He was too cold. Their world's too different. But love doesn't care about wealth or pasts or status. It cares about who shows up when everything else falls apart. In a world drowning in judgment and status, they chose heart. They chose each other, and they never looked back.